Welcome to this mini episode that I put out weekly. I'm David Chambers, and this is Authentic Man Podcast, but this is the weekly episode that I put out. And this is a topic that's really alive for me, not just now, but just always in my life, and just the way that a lack of a father figure affects men in particular, but it also affects women, and how it affects our ability to create healthy, connected, balanced relationships. And I see this a lot with men. I see a lot of men that I work with who come to me, and it's around the areas of masculinity or their ability to connect and so forth. And, when I dive in and you start asking about childhood and so forth, that there's no father around. So I'm just going to talk about my own experience, right? And this is going to be a short episode, and it's what might well in the future I do something longer where I get in a bit deeper into this. Because ultimately, I know my dad, he's not, completely distant in my life, but he wasn't a presence, the sort of presence I longed for as a child. So basically, he wasn't there in the way that I wanted him to be. And it meant many things for my romantic relationships. But, the first one I really saw, and this is not just my relations, but my life in general, is not knowing how to be a man. When you don't have a good, stable, strong masculine figure to look up to, right, in your life, it leaves you with this void internally of not knowing what it's meant, how you're meant to be, right? Now, for me, I just had a void. I was like, I don't know, I don't see any good men, so there's no good men, right? And men are not good, almost to an extent, and something I really healed a lot of when I went to the men's retreat recently. And then you end up with the opposite as a young boy, is you see women and you really idolize women, which is, I have a deep reverence for women, but for a young boy, he needs a masculine figure in his life. And I didn't have that. And I know a lot of men go the other way of finding quite dysfunctional masculine figures that often lead them down a route of anything from like crime, lots of anger, dysfunctional behavior, abuse in relationships, abuse of themselves, their bodies, whether that's drugs, addiction, right? And this all, to me, stems from a lack of father figure. And I just see it so commonly in men that I work with. So that man not being around is like, how I don't know how to be a man, so I don't know. So I either seek from men who are not particularly healthy and strong and vibrant, and the sort of man that you want to embody deep, purposeful, positive masculinity, and you find any man who seems strong, right, quote unquote strong, right, or you just have none and you have that void, which I see a lot for a lot of men, and they don't look up to any men and so forth. And another thing that comes up and that kind of come in my life was there were some toxic traits I had around sex and relationships, actually, and particularly sex was like, to be a man and to be looked up to as a man, you have to be having, lots of sex. That's what I was getting brownie points and stuff for. So, I started to see that wasn't necessarily a good thing, but it was really affecting my ability to connect with women, because I was just, locked in this getting validation from sex because it made me feel good, and, women paying me attention made me feel good, because I thought that was, that's what a man does. Other men are telling me that's good. They're giving me validation. They're telling me I'm cool and I'm awesome and I'm a player and stuff. And then we take that in. But that really adversely affects our ability to create healthy relationships. And another one which really hit me really hard personally, and it's something that I started to learn when I was probably about 18, 19, and I had a girlfriend, one of my first few girlfriends, was I didn't know how to have a relationship. I didn't know what it looked like to be in a relationship. Like, I remember going to my girlfriend at the time, her place, and her parents were still together. And I remember being in awe at just watching them, like, cook dinner, then clean up afterwards, and then sit down and talk and watch a TV and stuff like that, because I'd never seen that. I'd lived with my mum and my sisters. So often, I see for many men in their younger years, when they haven't had stable relationship they can look to in their lives, they don't know how a relationship looks. So this can lead to a lot of problems around, like, when you are in relationship, you're not knowing how to deal with conflict. You don't know how to do basic things like share, to bring compromise and harmony in a relationship. These are still things that I kind of struggle with, if I'm honest, because it's still learning, because it wasn't ingrained to me through my childhood, right? It wasn't something I just saw. I was able to then internalize. What I saw was just my mum, doing everything, right? Which also is one of the things that it creates for a lot of men is independence. This need of independence is like, well, I have to be independent, right? Because that's what we see. We internalize that because we don't see the interdependence of a relationship in our lives, a healthy relationship. So that's a really prominent one for me. And another one for me was emotional expression. You know, my father, when I did see him, there's a very lack of emotional expression. And this can come up with anyone who even had a father in their life that was present who didn't express emotion. So it's just this emotional expression, because what we need as boys is we need to see men around us, healthy masculine men who express their emotions, feelings, desires, wants, and needs, so we can mirror that behavior as we grow up. Right. And a lot of us don't even get this even when we have fathers, but that little piece there. And I've met guys who have talked to me about their fathers, how their fathers were very loving, very kind, very gentle, very, also very balanced. You know, there was no sexism and misogyny within them, right? Their fathers. And these men always have such an emotional maturity. Right. Again and again, I can think of off the top of my head about 5 or 6 men I know where their fathers were quite emotionally mature, and they are by proxy of that, right? So that's something that really affected me. I just couldn't, all the work I do now, all this work you see from my podcast around emotional expression, masculinity, relationships, the reason why I can teach this is because I had to actually learn it from scratch. I had to learn how this stuff worked and try all the things that didn't work and blah, 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 because I didn't have an internalization of it from my childhood, which I think, it's like they always say, often your biggest wounds become your gifts. And for me, this was very true, and, for a big wound for me, as I said earlier, was around sex and just validation. And then, over the years, I've learned to what deeply connected sex and how to create that and how to have that in a relationship and create sexual healing for 2 partners as well. So I guess that leads on to my last point around intimacy is like, often if you have not seen a cohesive, happy, loving relationship in front of you, with your father or masculine figure, you will struggle with intimacy because you don't know what intimacy looks like. And that's all levels of intimacy, and intimacy doesn't just mean sex, right? We're going to get that out of our minds, because intimacy is actually, there's emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, sexual intimacy, intellectual intimacy, and spiritual intimacy, right? And I think I even read recently there's conflict intimacy, which I think is being able to deal with conflict. But all those different levels of intimacy are needed to have a cohesive relationship with not just externally with other people, but also of ourselves. Emotional intimacy is feeling our own emotions, right? And I just see that these things that I've listed off here that affected me, they affect so many other men. And then they affect our ability to be in happy relationships, because when we're in those relationships, we are struggling internally with all these not knowings, these questions, or these internalized toxic behaviors, right, that we don't know where they come from. And then if we're with a partner who has more healthy examples of relationship, they struggle with it because they don't understand, right? Because they've never had your experience of not being in a kind of healthy, cohesive, mother-father relationship. And that's not to say that only mother-father relationships are cohesive. You just need 2 archetypal masculine and feminine that work together in some way to give you an idea of how that works. And it just makes relationships so hard. And I see a lot of men give up on relationships, they just don't bother. Or they continually find this, I'm looking for something better, because they don't know really what they're looking for. And it becomes this bit of a Peter Pan thing, everlasting, always going. So I just thought I'd record this because, as I'm sitting here, like I'm really feeling in my body how this has affected me. Like it was, my 20s were a bit of a car crash relationship wise, just because of all these things. And it's taken me, especially the last 5 years of working on these things to get to a place where like my relationship is really beautiful. But it's so worth it. I mean, if you're a guy and you're listening to this and this is where you are, you're maybe in your 20s or your 30s and your relationship's always full of trouble, strife, stress, infidelity, cheating, lying, hiding, inauthenticity, and you feel like it can never change, you can. Because I was experiencing all those things. And it's all turned around for me. And I know other men who've turned it around as well. It's not a dead end. It's not the way it always has to be. This is something that can change. And if you're a woman and you're with a man who, exhibits some of these qualities, believe in his change, if he can believe in it. If we want to change, we can change. We just have to believe it and see a pathway to it as well, right? And have the tools. And I think, there's a lot of tools, and that's not really the episode here to talk about the tools to how to build more healthy ways of being, to, self-soothe and move past our trauma. But it's possible. And just know that it's out there. People like myself, if you're looking for coaching in this area, come to me, drop me an email at hello@theauthenticman, or find me on Instagram at @theauthenticman_, and we can talk through how I can help. But, therapy is a good one to start with as well, and so forth. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope it's touched you in some way. If it has, please leave a review. That would be amazing. Or if you see this and you've listened to it, please share this with a man or a woman that that needs to hear this. Because, when we can hear that someone else has been through something and come out the other side, it lights that fire that we know that what's possible for ourselves. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful day.